You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Elijah. Ben is a specialist in strategic storytelling. There's a very specific thing I want to talk to you about as well as storytelling. But first, Ben, thank you for making time to come and speak to us.
Thanks for having me, Fred. Good to be here.
Yeah, this thing that caught my eye, which I messaged you, I mean, I've known you for a little while, but I messaged you immediately when I saw it, was this mental algorithm that you developed, which helps people to understand who they need to be when they're talking, if I'm right. I'm not sure if I'm right. That's why I've asked you to come on so you can explain it to me and to everyone else, because I loved what it was saying. I just want to make sure I get it absolutely perfect.
No, you're absolutely right. So this came about really from two places for me. I've spent a long time, sort of training and helping young salespeople and businesses in general to do a much better job of servicing their customers. And there's a lot of material out there on what to say, scripts for cold calls and flowcharts for discovery and all of that stuff. But if you sound like you've got the personality of a rotten apricot, you could say all of the right things, but you're going to sound about as credible as a weather forecast read by Amber Heard. So
you'll go for it today, aren't you?
So, I'm really interested in, as you know, in storytelling. And so much of storytelling is not just what you say, but how you say it and who you need to be, when you're communicating. And then the other angle that this came from was, I'm from quite a technical family. I'm the oldest of four brothers, and I'm the dumb one. And the others are all in their various fields, really, really super smart, big brain guys. I'm very, very proud of them. And my youngest brother is working as a software developer, and he's doing a lot of consultation with very senior people amongst his clients. And of course, they don't train people how to have conversations when they're doing technical degrees, which I think is a terrible shame. And he wanted me to give him some coaching around, how do I adapt to, for example, someone who isn't very patient, or someone who doesn't really care so much about detail, who, just wants the title of the book, not the chapter and verse. And I started talking with him and going through similar sort of exercises that you might with a salesperson. And he interrupted me and he said, "Well, Ben, that doesn't really work for me. I'm a technical guy. And I think in terms of algorithms, I think in terms of processes, I think in terms of, visual flowcharts, that sort of thing. Can you give me can you take what you're trying to teach me and put it into some sort of flowchart or algorithm that's going to allow me to put in the variables and it spits out the answer, and then I can just do it?" And I thought, that's a bloody good question. But then subsequently, it's not just for technical people, it's people that are trying to understand a customer that they, don't normally get to talk with. I mean, I don't know if you're talking to chief revenue officers, for example, and you're a 24-year-old SDR, it's probably unlikely that you've got people like that in your life. You might not have been exposed to the kinds of people that you're supposed to be interacting with. I could ramble about this for a long time, but the essence is that if you ask yourself 4 simple questions, and then based on the answers to those 4 simple questions, you can design the personality that you need to have when you speak with that person and hopefully get better results. And this is something that I've now trained, probably 200 or 300 people, including salespeople, technical people, and, even founders, CEOs. And the impact has been enormous. So that's a little bit of setup. How much more information would you like, or would you like to go through?
I think I'm loving where it's come from. They're helping your brother. I hope my sister doesn't hear it, because I'll have to help her loads more. It's working already, and there are 4 questions. I mean, I don't have to be the greatest podcaster in the world to ask you, what are these 4 questions, Ben?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
It's like, it's not the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
No, indeed. So the first one is to figure out, and if you want, Fred, I can send you a link to the blog post which proposes this, and if people want, they can download a copy of the diagram from there.
Definitely, please. We'll pop it in the show notes.
Excellent. So it starts with trust. So you simply ask the question, does this audience trust me or not? And if they trust you, by the way, trust is one of those interesting things because people always talk about trust in sort of in the same way as that senator talking about pornography. Well, I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And that's not really good enough. We need to have some sort of way of understanding trust for people that are struggling to create trust. And I really recommend Charles H. Green, who has a book called The Trust Equation. And he defines trust as credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by, what's it, Fred? Perceived self-orientation, perceived selfishness.
It's just while you're doing it, self-orientation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, talking about yourself, what kills trust. It's why I absolutely fucking hate PowerPoint presentations, because so many of them are just 20 minutes of, now let me tell you about me.
Map of the world.
Well,
loads dots all over it, few logos. Yeah.
Exactly. And, the poor customer who's sitting on the end of it, all he's thinking about is car, garage, and hose pipe. So, so with trust, do they trust you? Do they not trust you? And if they do trust you, then you can offer a perspective. You can offer opinion. You can offer your two pennies of thoughts, because guess what? They trust you and they'll listen to it. If they don't trust you, which it is most of the time, then instead of offering opinion, offering evidence or talking about things that are objectively verifiable. So, for example, if you're meeting someone for the first time, nobody gives a damn about what you think. So what do Gartner think? What does Forrester think? What are third parties that are trusted by the customer think? What do the people within their organization think? What does the United Nations think? What does the data say? So, start by talking about trends and things that exist in the world where the veracity is not going to be questioned and is going to be inherently trusted by the audience. So if you're not trusted, because that's creating credibility. And if you have some track record of dealing with that sort of thing, that's creating reliability. And then they relax a little bit and start being a little bit more intimate. And now we have the foundations of real trust.
And sorry, to just go back to that trust equation, and all of this you're doing in relation to them with their best intent at heart, because it's going to help them. Yeah, that's why you're doing this stuff. That's why the trust equation is an equation, because as soon as you do too much for your own good, it pulls the scores down. And that's why it's so beautiful. It's a brilliant piece of work.
Absolutely. By far the most effective professionals in any field. I'm sure you've seen this as well, Fred. I mean, if you talk about the partnering through selling skills, is, are you orienting yourself around the needs of your customer, or are you expecting them to be oriented around your needs? And I think Bob Moesta talks about this in, is it demand side selling? I think it's the name of his title. I'm pretty sure that. Where are you, an analogy for this is, if you think that you're the center of the universe and the customer is orbiting around you, it's all about you, it's all about your needs, it's all about your process, it's all about you, you're going to fail, because guess what? Then the planet will choose not to orbit that particular star.
Yeah.
But if you think of yourself as the planet orbiting the star and the star as the customer, much healthier way to think.
Brilliant. So
that's the first question.
We've got trust, yes or no, offer perspective, offer evidence. Okay, what's the second?
So the second is patience. So is this a patient audience or not? And patience exists across many different dimensions, right? So it will relate to how much technical information are they going to want to receive? How fast are they going to make decisions? So getting some sort of intel about this person is really useful. And a good tip, if you're ever introduced to somebody, or you meet someone and that person is known by someone else, they say, oh, I'm meeting this person. Oh, you know this person too, great. Ask them a couple of questions. What's the quickest way to piss this person off that I need to avoid? So, for example, if a partner's going to introduce you to someone, ask the partner, what's the most effective way to annoy this person? Are they patient? Are they impatient? And you'll get some good intel. And then it's very simple. If they are patient and they're expecting a lot of detail from you, give them the detail. You know? If you're meeting a group of people and one person's more patient than everybody else, and they're going to want a bit more detail, think about creating some sort of supplementary handouts or, pack that you can give to them. And, if they want all of the detail to consume, they'll consume it. But if they are not patient, for God's sake, don't be doing death by PowerPoint, right? Again, title of the book, not the chapter and the verse. Be mindful of the time.
Yeah. And then this is an interesting one, isn't it? If you're a detail person, it's getting your head around that other people don't necessarily need that. And you have to be punching to the point, and they're fine with that. It feels weird. It's equally hard if you're a big picture person having to give loads and loads of detail because it's just hard work and you find it boring, but it doesn't matter. It's about the other person again.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it correlates to a point we'll talk about in a moment, which is, where are they in that particular hierarchy? But, as a general rule of thumb, the higher up you go, the less patient people are going to be.
Yeah. Generally, yeah.
Cool. As a rough, exceptions.
Yeah, good. So we got trust and we got patience. And I love that question, by the way. What's the quickest way to piss them off? Third bit we need to be thinking about.
Third element is stakes. Is the stakes high or are the stakes low? And you could, you could think about stakes as, consider how important is the outcome to the customer, how urgent is the outcome to the customer. What are their expectations of you? Again, it's all sort of recognizing that probably their expectations of you might not be very high in the beginning. And that's also a consideration, by the way, as part of stakes. The customer's expectation of you is a component of it. So if you're working at a known brand where their expectations of you are going to be higher, it's very different to if you're coming from out of the blue, where their expectations are going to be a lot lower. So if the stakes are high, so high value outcome, high risk, and their expectations of you are high, then you need to focus on ways to reduce that person's risk. So how can you increase his or her probability of success in whatever initiative you're talking about? If the stakes are lower, or they're lower for the moment, maybe you're talking to someone super early on, the problem hasn't really been well defined, it's not super urgent, or you're coming from out of the forest, so to speak, and you're coming from the world of the unknown, then focusing on not on reducing risk, but on threats. Where are the risks coming from? So instead of saying, right, well, to reduce this risk, you're going to need to buy widget A, widget B, and widget C, and they're going to work together like this. If the stakes are a little bit lower, you need to go a little bit further back and say, well, why do we need to think about this? What are the threats, the obstacles, the things that are going to cause problems for you in 2 years? Am I making sense so far, Brett?
Absolutely. Have you seen you can't see how much I'm writing, but you can see my head's down quite a lot and my hands moving. So yeah, I'm loving this. Please keep going.
So again, you can imagine, I'm a 21-year-old or 24-year-old SDR, and I can ask myself these questions before I pick up the phone every time. And then the fourth point is this person I'm talking to, where are they in the hierarchy? And that's an absolute term, so it's not relative to you. So am I talking to someone who's like an individual contributor or a mid-level manager? Or am I talking to someone who, I guess in MedPIC terms, you'd call them an economic buyer, so someone like at C-level or C-1 level? And as a general rule of thumb, the higher up they are in the hierarchy, the less afraid of conflict they're likely to be. As a general rule of thumb, because you have to be willing to fight battles. You have to be able to stand up for a particular point. If you fold like a coked up origami champion at the first sign of conflict, it's very unlikely that you're gonna, that you're gonna climb your hierarchy. So if they're low in the hierarchy, you've got to be gentle, got to be very considerate, and probably a little bit more time warming them up with some rapport building and some small talk, and oh, how's the family, all of that stuff. But if they're higher up in the hierarchy, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you need to be a complete and utter four-letter word, but it will be expected that you're going to be more assertive. If there's something that's wrong, you need to call it out. If there's a truth or an elephant sitting in the room, you've got to address the elephant in the room. So the higher up they are in the hierarchy, the less polite, the more to the point, the more blunt you can afford to be. And as a matter of fact, someone said to me many, many years ago, when I was starting my career cold calling, they're going to delegate you down to the level that you sound like.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's so important as well when you're working through partners, because if a partner's introducing you at a senior level and you sound like that frightened 24-year-old kid, then they're going to delegate you down to, someone deep in the bowels of the organization, if you're lucky. But if you sound like you could be a member of their team, so for example, if you're calling it, I don't know, say chief information officer, and you sound like you could be, on the same sort of, on the same wavelength as like the head of data, then that's where they're going to delegate you, which is a good outcome. So being conscious of who they are in the hierarchy, where they are in their hierarchy, and tuning your assertiveness. It's one of the most powerful things that people can do. So that's the 4 questions.
Yeah. Just on that one then, is there a slight risk and then maybe this is exactly where you're going to go. Is there a slight risk that if you're not careful, you can sound a bit condescending? Because in trying to be assertive and to show your stuff, you come across as though you're talking down to somebody, which doesn't really work for anybody at any level, does it?
Yeah, that's not really being assertive. That's just being a prick.
It is, but people do it. And I was chatting to a friend this morning about it, and he gets lots of calls. He's an IT director, and he says he's actually got a name for these 3 different pitches that he gets. And one of them is the condescending pitch. People come in and say, "Oh, you don't know that," or "Here is what you should be knowing about how to do your job." And it's like, yeah, okay, bye. It is.
Assertive. It's a good point. It's a very, very good point. Assertiveness on its own. If you're just trying to be assertive, I must be assertive. Yeah, well, there are ways and means of doing it.
Yeah.
If you're both nurturing and assertive, it's a different story. If you, for example, you're having a conversation, someone says something that's wrong, and you say, "Well, you're wrong. That's absolutely a terrible idea." You're going to get a very different result than if you say, "I'm not completely sure that that's the right approach. Are you open to a second opinion?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're being equally assertive, but one is a little bit more nurturing than the other.
Yeah. It's my job to make sure we're looking at things from all angles. Let me suggest another way. We just have a quick look at this.
Exactly.
I don't think, yeah.
I mean, a good rule of thumb is, as a salesperson, you should never, foist your own opinions on people. You can offer a perspective, for example, if you're trusted. It's maybe the one exception to that, which we've covered earlier. But as a general rule, people will become a 15-year-old boy when you try and tell them what to think. Their first response is going to be to raise 1 or 2 fingers and tell you to leave in a reproductive manner.
I'm giggling because that happened yesterday when someone tried to tell me how to think.
What happened?
Oh, proper petulant teenager. It was quite embarrassing. Well, not embarrassing, it's just a natural reaction, isn't it?
Well, Freddie, I think it's an important consideration because I look at things like climate change denialism, vaccine hesitancy, and all these things, conspiratorial thinking, people who think that the world is a, oppressive patriarchy. I look at all of that, this sort of conspiratorial thinking as storytelling failure, as a product of a storytelling failure. And I don't blame the people who subscribe to this. My issue is that, if you're telling people, let's say we're the scientific community and we're telling people, right, well, here's the problem and here's what you need to do about it. And here's the conclusion. We've done all the math. We've done all the hard work. Here's the conclusion. And this is what you need to do. And you need to upend your life. Is it so? Because that's how it comes across.
Yeah. Yeah.
And coupled by the fact that these are people who sound different, maybe they look different. They've got very different lives to the lives of the people that they're addressing. So there's a lack of intimacy. Is it any surprise that people, look at that and say, no, I'm going to do the opposite of what you're telling me to do, same with vaccine hesitancy? Whereas if they say, here's the data, here's the evidence, and here's some information about some of the people that are working on this problem, but we trust you enough to make up your own mind. Here's the data. You tell me what you think. Maybe we'll get different results.
Yeah. Interesting. So naturally we're moving into storytelling now.
Yep.
Yeah. And you were talking sort of very high level and sort of very, UK, probably whole world, the similar things happened with that. But so let's think about storytelling in business I know you work at executive on all levels, but specifically for salespeople, because sales and storytelling is a pretty hot topic at the moment. Would you say, or am I? Is it just in my head? Because I find it fascinating.
I think it's always been a hot topic, but I think it's becoming. We're at an inflection point now.
Yeah.
It was becoming hotter and hotter, but we were like, the frog in the pan of slowly boiling water. Why I'm saying this? Because the world of selling it from features and benefits, and facts and logic and data was becoming slowly decreasingly effective as there were more in all sorts of fields, especially in tech, but in all sorts of fields, more and more competition, more and more competitors were coming in, and it was creating more noise in the market, and everyone else is trying to sell the same. And, it just creates a lot of confusion.
So just let me check something there. When you say sell the same, they're basically saying sell the same thing, packaged differently, or sell in the same way?
Sell in the same way.
Or both.
No, it could be both, but, selling the same way. It's like, if you think, let's pick on an example. Let's say SaaS sales, for instance.
Yes.
Well, what does that look like? You have an interest in solving some sort of problem. You're going to go to the market. You're going to research 3 to 5 different options. You're going to do quite a lot of your own homework. You're going to reach out to their website to request a demo. Some SDR, some inbound person's going to reach out to you and take you through some clumsy implementation of Bant, which just makes. That's why Daddy drinks.
Our mutual connection, Marcus Kaukiak. Whenever I hear Bant, I can hear him say, "Bant is bollocks."
No, it's like,
but it's right, as Marcus usually is.
How to say that you don't give a damn about the customer without saying you don't give a damn about the customer. But everyone's doing it. They're a gatekeeper, and then you talk to the account executive who's going to give you some ill thought out demo on rails, without any sort of thought or consideration, and you're being left to make up your own bloody mind. Or if you're going into another industry, they might be giving you the same PowerPoint they give to everyone else, which includes 15 minutes of egocentric nonsense, followed by, an info dump of which probably only a small amount is actually relevant. And you've got to do the hard work of filtering through all of that information, comparing it to other vendors. And, is it any surprise that people struggle with that? Is it any surprise that forecasts are becoming decreasingly accurate? Now, is there any surprise that, deals are getting torpedoed that you thought were a dead cert, but they're getting torpedoed left, right, and center? So this is the world that we've been in, and this is becoming increasingly and gradually more and more challenging. And the smarter people are realizing it, but, they're only smarter because most people are dumber. But we're now at a point where the economy is tanking. The world has become not just volatile, but brittle. And I think as a result, storytelling, its profitability is now on the line, right? So companies that found it easier to raise money from VCs than from customers, I think, the clock is ticking on them now. And if profitability is now king, then you've got to help the customer to sort through this information. And storytelling is how human beings have managed information overload for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, so it's about managing information overload. What else is it then about storytelling that makes it so effective? How does it work, if you like? Why have we always done it?
Well, think about, why is it that people love stories? Why is it that some of the most beloved and expensive artifacts that humanity has produced have been, you know, superhero movies or fantasy epics, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, exactly perfect examples. You know, these are excellent stories and they're all fundamentally the same story.
Yeah.
If you look at it, I really recommend a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell.
Yep.
He describes how thousands of myths throughout and stories throughout human history, everything from the stuff in the Bible to Beowulf to Star Wars, are all sort of manifestations of the same archetypical story. And you know, they're so powerful because when you're watching a film, when you're watching something really great like Lord of the Rings, you're forced to sort of step out and put yourself in someone else's shoes. You're forced to imagine yourself as that character. And that character is representing some part of yourself. Sometimes you might find in your life when you're a kid, you watch a film or read a book or whatever, and it doesn't sing to you. And then something happens in your life. And then the same book is suddenly incredibly meaningful because you're seeing some aspect of yourself in the characters.
If I'm understanding right, we are using stories to move from kind of bombing people with a whole bunch of logic and a whole bunch of features and benefits and all this and this sort of stuff to actually starting to connect with them on the emotional level because they're going to be feeling the stuff because it's about them. That's what's happened. That's what we like watching. My wife, well, I hope she doesn't listen to this as well. No family can listen to this podcast. But she's amazing watching films and stuff. If somebody starts crying, she will start crying. I mean,
Right.
her mirror neurons are just amazing on that, but because she taps into the emotion of whoever's going on or whatever's going on there. And that's kind of what we're doing, isn't it? Or we're trying to do to make our communication effective. Sorry.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it creates if you bring it back to trust, right? And we filter good storytelling through the lens of the trust equation. Credibility goes through the roof if it's done correctly. Intimacy goes through the roof when it's done correctly because you're creating, the oxytocin when you've got a story that people are buying into. Have you ever had those moments where you've just connected with a customer, where it's just clicked and you can feel the hairs on your arms start to go up and you can feel your goosebumps. You can feel that you're on the same wavelength as someone and you feel that it's almost a euphoric feeling.
Oxytocin is the love hormone.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The customer's going to fall in love with us if we get this right.
Well, it's not the customer's going to fall in love with you. It's this person's going to fall in love with you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, that's the key thing here. And of course, and your perceived self-orientation goes down because it's a story about the customer fundamentally, and the customer seeing themselves in the story. I fall in love with this stuff. It's something that, I was always aware of the importance of storytelling, but it's really only in the last year that I realized just how important it is to other people as well.
Yeah. And once I've been down a similar rabbit hole, so we've got to be really careful. I've got an eye on the time actually, because we could go on and on. We could create so many stories around this, and kind of what we've done to understand this better. But I just want to go back to something you said there. I said the customer fall in love with you, and you went, no, the person falls in love with you. That was a really important line. I just want to make sure that we've underlined that, because you're taking this selling to a real personal level. Yeah, to make contact with the individual, talking to them, about them. Yeah.
Are you up for a recommendation?
I'm always up for a recommendation. I love recommendations. That's why I do this stuff.
A tip for the audience about how to create a really simple but very compelling story. And this is very much inspired by two people I have a lot of respect for. One's called Andy Raskin, and the other is April Dunford, who wrote a book called Obviously Awesome. And she is an absolute master at positioning. And Andy is a genius at what he calls the strategic narrative, although I'm not sure that's quite the right phrase for it, but it's a brilliant way of saying there was an old game and then there's something changed and therefore the winners are now playing a new game. And I take these approaches and combine them and turn them into a very simple framework for storytelling. So you start by saying, here's the job to be done. And the job to be done, if you think of that as the board level initiative, the company's initiative, filtered through the lens of the person you're talking to. So, for example, companies starting up, and I'm just pulling this out of thin air here. Let's say they don't have any sort of CRM. And the CEO says, right, we need to get some predictability over our revenue. We need to understand, what's going on with our customers. And then filtered through the lens of the CRO, or maybe the CTO, they're looking at that saying, right, therefore the job to be done is we need a CRM that's going to allow us to achieve X, Y, and Z. That's the job to be done. In this case, the achievement of X, Y, Z. So you then say, well, to play that game in the past, you would do this. You had these options available to you. And that was great under these circumstances. For example, traditional CRMs, really, really good for when the customer already has an opportunity, that they kind of suck for nurturing customers pre-opportunity. But something has changed in the world that means that the old game is no longer a winning strategy. And so therefore, what the winners are now doing is they're playing this new game of nurturing customers before it becomes an opportunity. I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but it's beginning to sound quite compelling, actually. And then you say, again, keeping it vendor agnostic for the moment. So don't talk about yourself. This is what customers are telling us. This is what, we're seeing. And here's the evidence for it. Again, depending on whether they trust you or not, you're going to need to provide more or less evidence. And then you say, well, what we've observed, if you look at this case study, here's how people have gone wrong when they're playing the new game. Here's the people who've made certain decisions which take them on the red line down to hell. And it's one of the cool things you can literally draw it with a customer, little graph and
that's got Simon Bowen written all over it.
100%.
Red lines, green lines. Yeah, he would be very happy that we're talking about it. And I interviewed him about 3 podcasts ago. So if you're listening and you want to know what we're talking about, scroll back.
Simon is a genius, an absolute genius, because in the truest sense, because he's able to turn the complex into the very, very simple. I can't recommend him enough.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, just to finish, you then say, well, here's the green line. And from, if we look at what other people have done, again, don't make it about yourself. Don't make it about your opinion. Just provide the evidence. These are the interesting and unique decisions that have taken people like you to heaven. So you're saying, here's your Gandalf meeting Aragorn. I don't think he ever did this in Lord of the Rings, but you can imagine it happening, saying, here's the consequence of one set of decisions. Here's the consequence of another set of decisions. Mr. Customer, what's the right thing for you to do? What do you think? And it then becomes about customer's choice. And of course, now at this point, they trust you. Now you've shown some reliability because you've got real knowledge of what's going on. And hopefully now they're in a position where they're finally ready to explore what you can do for them.
Brilliant. I love this. I'm trying to do 2 things here. 3 things. I'm trying to keep a podcast in flow. I'm making notes about what you're saying, and I'm just tinkering with my own story, which is I'm close to it as to why I wrote a second book so quickly after the first book was basically because book 1 came out. And as book 1 came out, we had a global pandemic. So actually some of the things that book 1 was there to deal with, they haven't gone away, but there's another set of challenges. So the world's changed even more. That's why I went into book 2 and wrote that to keep you on your green line. Basically, that's what I'm trying to write here. Needs a bit more elegance, I think, to it. But so let me just summarize those. Here's the job to be done through the lens of who you're talking to. In the past, we all did this. Something has changed. What we've observed is that some people are trying to deal with this, but it's the wrong way. But this is what we've seen and what we're working with people to take them on the right way in broad terms.
Sort of.
That's simple. That's Copestake simple version.
Yeah.
What did I miss out? Did I miss a section?
Name the new game. So we have the job to be done. We have the old way to do that job.
Yeah.
But something has changed, which makes that no longer a winning strategy.
Yeah.
So, in the past, a winning strategy would be to play, but something's changed, which makes roulette no longer a winning strategy. So the winners are now playing chess.
Right.
And so name the new game.
Name the new game, because it gives some people a peg to sort of hang on all the rest of the stuff you're going to say and give it an identity.
Exactly.
Got you.
Exactly.
So I missed
And
the
then,
most important part.
but then we say,
Very
okay,
elegant of you to
continue
correct
that
me.
metaphor. Continue that metaphor. How do people screw up playing chess? And how do people get it right?
Yeah.
So the red line to hell, the green line to heaven. And again, that's all vendor agnostic. And the real trick here, if people were to take that story and get value from it, even if they buy from somebody else, then it was a good story.
Yeah. Got you. And stories, again, from my own research into this, I've been down that a while. They're 22 times more memorable or something. And people remember the story and they'll go, and even if they kind of mess it up a little bit when they're going and telling their boss or their colleague or whatever, then there will still be the feeling that, oh, it's made us uncomfortable. Yeah, because I can associate with this that we're kind of on this red line to hell or we're not doing something right. Can you get the guy back in who told that story so we can hear it properly? And you're on the right path yourself.
Exactly. And you can make them even more memorable by introducing visuals, diagrams, models, Simon would call them, because then people, what you need 3 minutes to read a paragraph of text for, you look at it visually and it just makes sense.
I received his newsletter this morning, just before I recorded this with you. I was skimming and literally I didn't read, I think, any of the words. I looked at the models he drew and I knew exactly what he was talking about. I mean, the guy is great. He is a genius, you're right. We shouldn't use that word from too many people, but I will with him. And I think you're a bit of a genius, to be fair, mate. I mean, you really have given so much value. Here you've talked to us about this kind of mental algorithm, which you've simplified quite a complex way of deciding how you're going to be, how you're going to say stuff, done very elegantly. Talk to us a little bit about storytelling, which is a huge area. And then given us that model about, what we do for name the game, Fred, name the game. Right. I need to remember that bit. And then making sure people are realizing, well, red line or green line, or start red line, but you have got the green line. Oh, you've given us so much in such a short time. And I know you got load more to give. Where can people get in touch with you?
Well, probably the best place to get a little bit more from me is my website, which is executivestory.io. And if people want to hit me up on LinkedIn, this is Ben Elijah on LinkedIn. Maybe we'll put a link to the profile as well.
We're going to put a link to that particular blog, a link to executivestory.io, a link to your LinkedIn profile. We'll pop that in. Yeah. And sorry, I cut you off. Bad.
No, I think that's probably about it.
Well, I know it's not about it from the stuff that you could share with us. And I certainly want to be talking to you again at some stage.
Thank you, Fred. And what you're doing as well. I mean, particularly, selling through partnering skills. If you've noticed a slight uplift in sales of the book, it's because I've been promoting it left, right, and center, because this is the future of selling. It's reputation, creating partnerships, creating referrals, which then enhances your reputation.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, mate. Appreciate that. No, that's really cool. That's really cool. Well, thank you for that. And again, thank you so much for coming in and sharing so much with us just now.
My pleasure, Fred. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, Fred Copestake. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe for more and leave a review. If you didn't like it, also leave a review. It's all about feedback and learning.